Nothing in this podcast is intended as investment advice, and the people in this podcast may hold positions in the stocks they talk about. Do not buy any investment based solely on a tip or recommendation. Please do your own research.
Hello and welcome to the Midweek Takeaway. Today we're joined by Colin Bird, Chairman of Kendrick Resources. Welcome back, Colin.
Thank you, and nice to talk to you both again. Hope you're well.
Yeah, we're all good here. Thanks, Colin. So, obviously, we've seen some exciting news regarding the advancing the nickel projects in Norway and Sweden to address the nickel supply shortfall crucial for battery production. The company benefits from the European Commission's Critical Raw Materials Act 2024 and favourable mining legislation in stable jurisdictions. Nickel sulphides are particularly significant because they're easier and more energy efficient to process compared to nickel laterites, making them a preferred source for battery-grade nickel. Kendrick's focus on sulphide deposits, such as those in Njuggträskliden and Mjövattnet projects in Sweden and the Espedalen project in Norway, positions the company to meet the growing demand for high-quality nickel essential for the evolving battery industry. So it's all about the sulphides and locating them to meet the supply shortfall. Tell us how you plan to attack this, please, Colin.
Yeah, if we can just down the sulphides a second or two, is that sulphides, I wondered, and it's something I wanted to address, and this probably podcast is as good a way of addressing it. Why on earth did everybody panic and a lot of nickel mines around the world close when nickel dropped to about 14, 15? I thought, gee whiz, wouldn't they, in the copper business, we'd love to have 14, 15, and yet, and we'd make a fortune. And yet the nickel industry is under pressure. And it's just as you say, that a lot of those projects, and the ratio is anywhere now between 60 to 40, 60% laterites to 40% sulphides to 70% laterites, 30% sulphides. And the reality is there's two elements to it. One is complex, and complex means inevitably complex metallurgy means lots of front-end loading in terms of capital. You actually pressure leach, sometimes not only pressure, it's sometimes temperature. Massive vats. So you can remember Ravensthorpe down in Australia. I think BHP spent about 7 or 8 billion on that one, and sold it on. Just the metallurgy is an absolute nightmare. But within that nightmare is the 3 to 7 times energy cost. That's an absolutely killer. So remember, we're in this business. So do we want the nickel, which is going to be sort of going into the batteries, is using 7 times more energy to make. That's a great achievement in terms of the energy balance. So it's and once again, we often talk on these podcasts about that's frightening, this is frightening, but the fundamentals aren't just as simple as we'd all like them to be, Phil, and that's a pretty horrendous fact to face, that the sulphides are declining. We need the nickel, and yet the laterites at the moment. And, we're talking about 20 years of a lack of success by the majors. The majors usually can buy their way through these metallurgical problems, but not been able to buy their way through this. So how's it going to roll out? This, again, is, we're copper buffs. In every single project we're talking about down here, there's copper and association. Why are we in Scandinavia? Well, we're in Scandinavia because we're banging the hub of Europe, both for nickel manufacture. In fact, there's a nickel manufacturer, I think, within 30, 40 kilometers, as close as that, to our Swedish projects. The refining capacity is out on the ocean there. That's easy to get at. We're at the Norway, Sweden, Finland, all of those countries in that area. We've gone through a strategic change. I mean, mining was the curse. Mining was the dreadful thing. And then, of course, comes a reality, Phil, that if we ban all mining, and we've got to pack up because you need mining for the bright new future that we're all looking for. So they've opened up to that, and as the European Union, and recognized the fact that, these critical metals, raw materials, we better identify them and see what we're going to do to source them. And we're busy making our application into that movement so that we'll be recognized as a would-be producer, a soon-be producer, certainly an explorer at this stage. And that will help us in the arena of recognition and the arena of financing. So that's something we're doing. But I'd like to draw your attention to these Swedish projects, which, EMX Royalty are a great company and got a good spread of positions around the world. And that's very strong in North America too. And they're good people, very helpful people. Don't just sort of lend you some money or, sort of finance projects and then just wait for things to happen. They're actually in there at the pick point doing what they can to assist you. So that's That's very supportive, and we do appreciate that. And we didn't need a lot of help, quite frankly, to pick up these projects, to be persuaded. But to have the MX as a royalty partner is absolutely great. You'll also see, if you look at the grades, that they're exceptional. You'll also see that they've got copper in association, and you'll also see that the PGMs crop up as well. Now, as high as 1% platinum and a little bit of cobalt. But PGMs aren't particularly popular at the moment, as we both know, as we all know, all three of us know. But the fuel cell is going to put up the requirement for platinum. The fuel cell isn't a million miles away, and the fuel cell is being sort of backed and projected by China as really the long-term solution to all of this. So it's good to have the PGMs in association, and they end up giving us value, very serious, around the $300 to $300 to $400 value of metal in per ton of ore, which makes it particularly valuable. Even underground, it works underground. But obviously, when all of these places are close to surface, these projects are close to surface, it's even more attractive. You're pretty happy normally with between 70 and 100. Very happy, in fact.
So, Colin, these sulphides, this is sulphide in both the Swedish and the Norwegian projects. I'm not even going to try and say the names, so we'll just call them Njug and Njuggträskliden this minute time.
The ones in Sweden. I was looking forward to that.
Yeah, bit of a tongue twister.
Njuggträskliden. I'm afraid that's not going to happen.
And I got your lollipop lined up, Kevin.
And Njuggträskliden. Okay,
you said it. You said it, yeah.
Please don't criticize me. I can't pronounce these things, so I struggle sometimes with simple words. But this whole scenario between laterites and sulphides, what percentage of the world's nickel is laterites?
As I say, well, that's a good question. That's put a little bit differently. I talked about, because when I was talking about the 70-30-60-40, I was talking about the known resources. So some of that is kind of futuristic. And I guess if you go back to my point which preceded that, I said that I could figure out, but I'm sure that a lot of people did struggle with the concept that nickel's in sulphides, copper's in sulphides, they're jumping up because copper's 9,500, 10,000. Yet the guys who produce the nickel are shutting down at 14, 15 when it dropped down to there. So there's your answer, Kevin. A large proportion now coming from laterites, and there's not a lot of evidence of laterites working that well. So immediately the pressure came on non-sulphide projects. Craig came under great day-to-day financial pressure at 14, 15,000.
There was big economic problems to get stuff out.
Every other day saw a new nickel mine closing. Saw a new evidence of nickel mine closure. I'm going back about 5 months now.
So the sulphides themselves are very similar to processing the copper. Then you basically
that's correct.
Flotation, smelting, etc.
That's right, and it's all about nickel pyrrhotite pentlandite ratios. Which process you go? You can go flash furnaces, you can go normal reverbs. Sometimes you use electric furnaces, and there is a bit of complexity, but nothing of the magnitude in capital. But as I say, capital is one thing if you can overcome the problem. When the working costs are inflated by as much as, energy is always is the principal cost of processing, because by definition, you need energy to break the rock down to release the metals. So if you're talking about 7 times more energy, the worst case, probably an average of 3 or 4 times. That's a serious purchase you're making to your direct cost structure, and so you can't stand much attack on metal prices. So
you mentioned also that it's 100 kilometers by sea to the Kokola nickel smelter.
That's right.
Right.
Everything is close. Yeah.
Yeah. So the scenario is both that and the battery manufacturers. Have you had any conversations with any of them? Has anybody been taking any notice of what you're doing, Kendrick?
Well, obviously they've taken notice, but it is early doors. Obviously, we are the industry, the EU, the government. Obviously, we talk to those as well, the local people. Whoever you talk to recognize the proximity to surface, but are also concerned about small projects. So when you see, I think collectively, around about 25 kilometers of strike, Kevin, and the fact that these projects are open-ended, we are not actually looking at, in Sweden there, we're not looking at small projects. We're looking at something which it could grow to be a very, very big project, either or both. Both could grow to be very big projects in the right place, sophisticated towns nearby, with the right factories to support the mine. Obviously, the obligation will be on us to make those mines neat, not an intrusion or an eyesore on the surrounding area. But there's a lot of examples of that in Scandinavia, and so I don't think you could be in a better position if you tried. And then, of course, this latest EU critical raw materials push, I think, in actual fact, is going to be the cherry on top for what is a great position. And the majors are recognizing that, of course. Of course, nickel, I mean, whichever battery you look at, Kev, comes a problem, comes a problem. When you start talking about the cobalt contribution to some batteries, you're entirely dependent on the Congo. That's a great thing to be. And, would the world, if you're running the Economic Union and the European Union and they're running car industries in Europe, would you sooner be dependent on Sweden, Norway, or the Congo? Don't answer the question because you don't need to. It's pretty obvious. So right place, right time, and it's typical to our the way we work.
Just a question on that, Colin, regarding the critical raw materials that you mentioned. I saw that copper and nickel are not on that list of. They referred to it as basically the CRM thresholds, but are included on the CRM list as strategic raw materials in line with the Critical Raw Materials Act. So, how do they define that in terms of the different thresholds?
Yeah, I rather think that that's more to do with specialty metals.
Yeah,
and that the threshold has grown because of the change in technology, almost the industrial revolution, with the new EV cars and renewable energy. And I think what has happened here is, yes, at where we sit now, there's about 900 million tons of copper, for example, known in the world, but we've got mines which are producing. But what about tomorrow? And I think the recognition is tomorrow. And so it's as much about diversity of supply than it is about how critical they are. Yes, of course, the next 20 years are probably provided for, but at what cost? Do we really want as Europe to go out to buy, be dependent on China? Or will China, in actual fact, have gobbled up all the copper and nickel? I think, I'm going to shoot off the top of my head, and hopefully I won't stand too much correction, but of 190 facilities, you're talking about mines, processing plants, diggings, the whole range of operations in Southeast Asia, 90 out of 190 are owned by the Chinese. So when you talk about diversity, that's a bit scary, So the European Union are saying, nickel and copper probably are not that scarce as we need to go into panic mode. But, we'd like to see diversity of supply. We probably wouldn't agree with that, Kevin. We probably wouldn't agree with that because we are already seeing the fact that it's probably less important about cost than it is supply, which is multiplying the statement I've just made by 2 or 3, and I really do see the nickel battery people getting involved with us, because why go through a trader when you've got a mine, 30 kilometers up the road? To me, that is extremely important. So I've said in previous podcasts, the trader has got to look at his model too. Does he, before he's always been pig in the middle, procures his supplies, makes deals with the end user, makes deals with the mine, takes his turn on the movement and guarantees supply. I think they're windy enough nowadays to start actually looking, let's make deals with the miner. And how nice, when you're 30, 40 kilometers from the factory, making these batteries. So good position, Kevin. Good position.
And they're making partnerships with big manufacturers. I think I was looking Volkswagen, BMW, Volvo, big collaborations, and they are aiming to produce some 150 gigawatt hours of battery capacity annually by 2030, which is, it's enough to power. That's millions of electric vehicles for each year.
Yeah, that's right. And now they've got to do partnerships with us. So, by definition, the trader who basically gets in bed now with the car manufacturer has now got to get into bed with the likes of us, which takes them down the chain a bit further and a bit earlier. So it's all good for the small miner. The number of times I say the day of the small miner is back is yet another. You've just articulated again the perfect storm, which supports that statement.
So, Colin, all these assets were in Kendrick when it first listed at about £8 million market cap. That's currently
the Swedish one. No? The Swedish ones weren't, Kevin. They were acquired last year.
Okay. So really it came to market with just the Norwegian assets and the vanadium?
Correct.
And at that time, you valued it at about 8 million market cap, and now with these respective Swedish assets, we're looking at 2.9 million market cap. So what's your comment on that?
Well, my comment on that is, I never try and crime in my beer. And there is an underlying reason, apart from the general sort of pressure that's been on small mines. Kendrick got going and we found ourselves in a cost structure which was alien to us. It is extremely expensive in Northern Europe, Scandinavia, to do things. Take soil samples, employ professional people like geophysicists, chemists, geochemists, geologists. And so we had to actually spend the first year, if you like, getting an organization. It's all right. It's all right being competent in Africa, but it's no good being competent in Africa and you can't bring those skills too far, too long. And you need focus. You can't take on projects like these two Sweden. Well, all the projects, the vanadium, and the nickel in Sweden and the nickel in Norway. You can't take those projects on without a structure. And so, thanks to Martin, in no small way, that those structures were took in place. You can dive in with consultants, but I found in life, and most of the people who I work for have found in life, is it's good to have consultants, but you've got to really have responsibility. You've got to be hands-on. You've got to be doing your own negotiation. You've got to be taking your own decisions, and you can't be handling third-party generated data and without too much control. That's a formula for disaster. So we had to focus. We had to be masters of our own destiny. And I think that why don't we use the word thing? That in actual fact wiped out the first year of Kendrick, just making sure we're on a cost structure which didn't mean we needed a place in every 5 minutes, which allowed us to do the programs we wanted to do. Some of the money was spent in the UK, of course, for the vanadium. We used Wardell. They did all the work on the upgrading of the vanadium, and we did find, of course, that we could get a bigger recovery and retain the mass. And so that was tremendous work that we did on vanadium. And now, and our geologists now, everybody who's employed on the projects are on pay structures that we're familiar with. They're a little higher than Africa, but not exceptionally so. So why wasn't it recognized? Hopefully I've explained that the starter project, if you like, the vanadium, we all agreed, I think, on this podcast that vanadium is only on the way to being recognized. It's even got a mundane use apart from storage, Kevin, as I said, that, the rebar specs as well. So don't underestimate that. But nonetheless, it's going to take time. But nickel is today's story. Nickel is today's story, like copper's today's story. And a chance when we got these Swedish projects, we were absolutely delighted because, it's likened to Thompson, Manitoba, the big nickel projects, the geology is. And the fact that it's open-ended to depth, near surface, we've got a resource which we could add to very quickly. It's got strike extension possibilities for 25 kilometers in total between the two projects. That was a tremendous acquisition. And that didn't add to the 8 million. I mean, that essentially, if you threw the vanadium away, if you threw Norway away, this project is top class. This Swedish project is really top class. And but it hasn't sort of taken from the portfolio. It's added to the portfolio in a very, very significant way. And I think, over the last few weeks, the market seems to be recognizing that a little.
Okay, so let's just look forward to going forward, Colin, because obviously there was a maiden drill that took place in January of last year and finished at the end of March on the Norwegian assets on Stormera. Do you want to just talk us through what that drilling campaign will look like? So I think you've identified an extra, 500 meters of a high grade zone there?
Well, that's right. We've identified that. We've also, there's room for extension there. There's 10 other untried deposits which have got known values in excess of 1% nickel. So we are in the Stormera Espedalen, we are in a very, very nickeliferous area. And what you see now, what million tons or so, but by Blackthorn, I think it was, the potential to increase that by big multiples is there. And it's a very similar story, but location varies, but it's still extremely well located. But the fundamentals for sulphides are absolutely brilliant. Open-ended again, strike extensions, similar type deposits in the same environment in the same region. Receptive, been and seen them there myself and chatted to her, and she recognizes, the potential. So all in all, Stormia and Espedalen and all that general area, together with Sweden, puts us into the Scandinavian nickel story very comfortably into the nickel line, and puts us in a position we can talk to the European Union, puts us in a position we can talk to local governments and regional governments in Norway. So again, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first steps, but we started it, Phil.
So what's the drill program going to look like for the next 6 to 8 months or something like that?
Well, you cannot turn your back on the Swedish, the fact that you're not really interested in testing for depth, because, that's the flip of the coin. But every kilometre strike you can add, that 25, is a massive plus if you can start reproducing that geology in Sweden. So I'd like to find at least 10 million tonnes with a nickel equivalent over 2%, counting in the copper, counting in the PGE credits and more cobalt credits. So that would be the ambition there. And the ambition in Norway isn't much different. So once you start getting to 10 million tonnes and 2% nickel equivalent, you then start doing the next step, which is planning mines. And that means working with the local government. That means working with the off-takers. That's the serious work. We find ourselves in a lot of the things we're doing. And then by then, of course, vanadium, in my opinion, vanadium will have been gathering the redox batteries will be gathering their momentum. And I think there will be deals to be done, again, with local companies and again with international companies. But the vanadium story will be well located for that one, extremely well located for that one. But you can't, why push uphill? You don't need to. When you've got the nickel projects, and when the vanadium, by the last drilling campaign, that you can take 44 million tonnes, 100 million tonnes, and by the metallurgical work you've done, you can maintain recovery, concentrate grade, and it's, the techniques that Wardell Armstrong developed do not prejudice either the cost structure or the capital structure. So we're delighted with the pre-work we've done. And we've got a couple of routes, Bill, one of which is quite revolutionary and obviously not the time to discuss it. But we're not without quite a few options there with our Njuggträskliden vanadium project in northern Sweden. So all in all, what are you looking at? You're looking at a fairly balanced portfolio again. We're very tempted to add on to this because contiguous we have opportunities. But, we're so excited about what we've got. It's heads down now and make them work. Do Sweden and Stormia run neck and neck? No, I don't think they do. I think Sweden, remember, is quite a bit in front, very near surface, and 25 kilometres identified. But on the other side of the coin, Norway, again, we put a very high grade zone to drill. So I think we'll probably end up doing a few more meters in Sweden than we do Norway. We've got two cracking targets I think another thing about which one tends to forget when you're talking about Scandinavia, Phil, is some of it can be seasonal. Yeah. Whether you want to drill it and drill or not.
In the ground in the harder ground, isn't it, in the winter than it is in the summer?
Yeah, isn't that daft? You can't work in the summer because it's a bog. And these new Swedish projects that we acquired in the middle of last year, we can work year round. So there's a plus there.
So, Colin, who of the sort of major scenario would be interested in these projects once you get them to a certain level? Who are the big nickel players in the world?
The big nickel players, the biggest one, I think, Brazil are very, very big. The former Vale, they're quite big in the nickel story. It's not rocket science at the level we're at, Kevin, and you summed it up. It's pretty much like copper. So at the level of mine, the size of mine, we could certainly engineer the mine. I think down in Norway, it's something we could manage and probably do ourselves. I'm rather thinking that the Swedish situation is probably prove up and partner. And maybe even partner with Northvolt themselves. I mean, I shouldn't really say that, because we haven't talked to them. But partner up with a battery user or a battery maker seems an intelligent thing to do too. So might not be a conventional industry partner, a mining industry partner. It may be manufacturer or even the user of the battery. So, and especially now the EU have formed this body, which they want to put explorers, developers, and users together.
It's interesting times in the mining industry. I think a lot of things that will happen over the next few years have not historically happened before. And that's where people need to think a little bit outside the box in terms of these companies, because there's going to be alliances that are not usual in terms of mining industry of all.
You are so right. I gave a paper which was at in London on the 29th at presentation. Well, let's call it a paper. It was a presentation, and I use that word disconnect. There's a massive disconnect now between the way things were done and the way things are likely to be done. There was no small mining industry, Kevin. It was wiped out to 2008. There was small and medium mines, and a lot of them in absolute, the 2008 crisis were just absolutely wiped out mid-build. Not because they were lousy projects, it's because everybody lost their nerve. I think we don't, it is not commonly recognized what 2008 did to the mining world. We were getting onto a roll, there'd been 25 years of payback where there'd been no exploration and mining companies didn't figure. And what have we done? We've gone straight back into that times two. So 2008, we've been, there was a little bit of a uplift in 2012, 13, 14. You will recall probably as well as me, probably better. But we didn't get the benefit of it, Kevin. We didn't get the benefit of it. But, like it or not, nobody's going to build a big nickel mine in 5 minutes. Nobody's going to build a big copper mine in 5 minutes. So this end of the industry, which we've discussed many, many times, and I'm sure we'll discuss many more times, has to be the beneficiary for the lack of investment in the mining industry 30 years. We only had a few years of good times, pre-2008. Has been a lack of the recognition of the changes which are coming that you and Phil referred to. And it's just hanging there, patience, application, and as you say, dancing on your feet, being on the right place at the right time. We'll bring our shareholders, not all of them, but hopefully most of them, who have been long and patient in all of the companies now, which are in this pioneering metal discovery market. There should be much better times, Kevin, because patience will definitely be a virtue in this environment. And, that's where I'm coming from. I see nothing to change that thinking. Every time I look at what's happening with presidents and what's happening with the geopolitics and what's happening in repositioning in the world, when I see all of a sudden America waking up and wanting to spend money on raw materials, this EU initiative, the recognition that Chinese have broke away and have got a head start. If this was a Grand National, it'd be about 4 fences in front. There's some catching up to do, Kevin.
Yep, it certainly is. Well, we wish you good luck, and maybe we'll get out there and see what's going on in Sweden next year some stage, or even later this year if there's drilling going on. So, let's see what's happening.
Well, that's the time to go. September, October is a good time to go. November. But as I say, the Swedish is accessible year-round and quite close to Lightstown too. So everything going for it, the Swedish nickel properties. But thank you very much for your time, both of you. And thank you for giving us the opportunity to air our thoughts on our Scandinavian projects and, of course, Kendrick.
Very good.
Yeah, just to let you know, listeners, as well, that Charles Archer is putting out a note on Kendrick Resources in the next day or two as well. So if you want to read it rather than hear it, it'll be available to you in the next 24 hours.
Okay, on that note, we'll say Colin Bird, Executive Chairman of Kendrick Resources. Thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, Jen. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Phil.
This podcast was brought to you by Roast PR Limited. If you would like to appear on a future episode of The Sunday Roast, please email admin@thesundayroast.net